Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you are here with us today.
Yeah, really looking forward to this one. It's a pretty heavy but incredibly fascinating topic.
It really is. So I want you to imagine something for a second. Just picture this. What would you do if your very existence, like your actual physical body, was the physical evidence of a crime?
It is a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It is, but for our subject today, it was reality. We have this incredible stack of sources in front of us, drawn from excerpts of Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, specifically the adaptation for young readers.
Right.
And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly how a child born under an intensely oppressive regime managed to use language, humor, and the guidance of a fiercely rebellious mother to navigate a legally segregated world. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a really fascinating starting point because to understand the crime itself, you really have to understand the law.
The mechanics of it, yeah.
Exactly. Apartheid wasn't just physical segregation. It was the South African government's highly advanced, incredibly paranoid system of racial oppression. I mean, they essentially studied institutionalized racism globally.
They took notes.
They did. They combined the displacement of native peoples, slavery, and segregation into one massive bureaucratic police state. And what is most striking is the absolute absurdity of the racial classifications they invented to make this work.
Absurd is the right word.
For instance, Japanese people were granted honorary white status simply because the government wanted to import their cars and electronics.
Wait, they literally elevated an entire demographics racial status just to facilitate trade.
Yep.
How did they even justify that on paper?
They barely had to. It was purely transactional. And meanwhile, Chinese people were classified as black simply because there weren't enough of them in the country to warrant devising a whole separate bureaucratic category.
The arbitrary nature of it is just mind-blowing.
It is.
And under these incredibly rigid laws, race mixing was considered the ultimate crime. It was actually treated as worse than treason.
Which tells you a lot about the system's fragility.
Exactly, because a mixed child proved that the system was fundamentally incoherent. It proved that people of different races could and did want to mix. And into this hyper-surveilled environment steps Trevor's mother, Patricia.
Patricia was a rebel to her core. Under the law, her designated path as a black ex-HOSA woman was basically predetermined. She was supposed to work in a factory or as a maid.
Right, those were the options.
But she flat out refused that life. Instead, she took a secretarial typing course, which was incredibly rare, and got a white-collar job.
And then she takes it a step further.
She does. She decides to live illegally in downtown Johannesburg in an area called Hillbrow. She would actually dress up in a maid's overalls just to move around the city without getting stopped by police.
Hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And she secretly rented a flat from an expat.
So she's living illegally in this expat building, dodging the police daily. How does she even go about starting a family in that environment?
Well, living down the hall from her was Robert. He was a 46-year-old, quiet, reserved, Swiss-German expat. Patricia and Robert formed a connection, and that relationship resulted in Trevor's birth. But even the birth itself required subverting the system.
Right. The hospital scene from the text is incredibly tense. When Trevor is born, the doctors immediately note this is a very light-skinned baby with no father in sight.
A massive red flag for the authorities.
Huge. If the truth came out, Patricia could face 5 years in prison and Trevor would be taken away by the state. So Patricia had to lie on the spot. She claimed the father was from Swaziland.
A quick-thinking survival tactic.
And because of that lie, Trevor's birth certificate literally just listed him as being from another country, completely erasing his actual Swiss heritage just to keep him out of prison.
They had to go to extreme measures to keep him hidden. It wasn't just paperwork either. It was an everyday physical reality.
Yeah, Patricia couldn't even walk down the street holding her own child's hand.
Just think about that for a second.
There's this unbelievable detail in the source where Patricia used a colored neighbor named Queen. When they wanted to go to the park, Queen would walk next to Trevor, acting like she was his mother.
Yeah, Patricia.
Patricia would have to trail a few steps behind them, pretending to be Queen's maid. Imagine not being able to hold your own toddler's hand in public.
It was a daily performance just to survive.
Yeah.
But it was even more dangerous when they visited Soweto, the township where Trevor's grandmother lived.
Because Soweto was essentially a fortress?
Right. It was home to 1 million people, but it was designed by the government essentially as a prison. It only had 2 roads in and out to completely control the population.
And the police presence was terrifying.
They weren't just driving around in patrol cars. They were a militarized occupying army. They had these flying squads riding in armored personnel carriers that the locals called hippos.
Because of the constant threat of these police swooping in and taking him away to an orphanage for colored kids, Trevor was kept strictly indoors. He had to play behind a wall at his grandmother's house.
His whole world was a walled garden.
I want you to imagine learning later in life that an entirely different reality was possible. Like learning about parachutes after you've already jumped out of the plane.
That's a great way to put it.
Trevor had this exact realization at age 17 when he met an exile who had returned to South Africa. He found out that other mixed families had actually fled the country to Europe.
They just left.
Yeah. And he asked his mother, he said, "Why didn't we leave? Why didn't we go to Switzerland?" And Patricia, stubborn as ever, simply replied, "Because I am not Swiss. This is my country. Why should I leave?"
What's fascinating here is how that unyielding spirit mirrored the broader environment of Soweto itself.
How so?
Well, it was a township economy built entirely on resilience and aspiration. You had these informal grocery stores called spaza shops operating out of garages.
Right.
And unlawful speakeasy bars called shebeens. People were building their homes literally one brick wall at a time, sometimes over generations.
And the driveways.
Yes, the most powerful metaphor for this is the driveways. Families would build these beautiful cast-iron gated driveways next to their shanties, despite having absolutely no cars and no prospect of ever getting one.
It represented an undeniable, incredible sense of hope.
They were willing the future into existence.
That is such a vivid image. They were building the infrastructure for a life they believed they would one day have. And while the community was building driveways, Trevor was building his own survival mechanism, language.
He had to. There's a profound psychological insight here into how language actually short-circuits racist programming.
The architects of apartheid deliberately separated black tribes by language to keep them divided.
Right, exactly. But Trevor noticed something interesting while watching American TV shows. When the shows were dubbed into African languages, the black actors felt familiar to him.
Like they were part of his community.
Right. But when he listened to the original English audio simulcast on the radio, those same actors suddenly felt like foreigners. Language brings with it an identity. Speaking someone's language convinces their brain that you belong to their tribe, regardless of what you look like.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Trevor and his mother completely weaponized this insight.
They were brilliant at it.
There's this incredible story where they were in a shop and the racist white shopkeeper told his security guard in Afrikaans to follow the blacks to make sure they didn't steal.
Assuming they wouldn't understand.
Exactly. Patricia didn't get angry. She just spun around and replied in absolutely fluent, beautiful Afrikaans.
I love that moment.
The shopkeeper was so shocked his brain broke, he completely changed his tune, apologizing for aiming his racism at them, saying he thought they were like the other blacks.
Just completely short-circuited his prejudice.
And Trevor used the same tactic himself later on. He was walking down the street and realized a group of Zulu guys behind him were plotting in Zulu to mug him.
A terrifying situation for a kid.
But instead of running, Trevor spins around and suggests in fluent Zulu, "Yo guys, why don't we just mug someone together? I'm ready."
That is incredible presence of mind.
It completely diffused the threat. They started laughing, apologized, and let him go, all because he spoke their language.
He essentially became a chameleon, and this linguistic superpower became the deciding factor in how he defined his own identity. To understand the stakes of this, we have to look at the educational divide.
Right, the Bantu schools.
During apartheid, the government set up Bantu schools designed explicitly to cripple the black mind. They taught only metrics and agriculture. They were literally teaching an entire generation how to dig holes and count potatoes.
Wait, so the government curriculum was literally designed to prevent intellectual growth. That's not just neglect. That's weaponized education.
Exactly. It was engineered subjugation. This was in stark contrast to the mission schools that had previously educated black leaders. Trevor initially went to a private Catholic school where everyone was mixed, but later he transitioned to a government school called H.A. Jack Primary.
And that's where he saw the reality of it.
He was suddenly faced with a visible, brutal racial divide right there on the playground.
At H.A. Jack, he tested into the A classes, which were almost entirely white kids. But at recess, he saw an ocean of black kids on the other side of the yard.
A literal physical divide.
Yeah. An Indian friend introduced him to the black kids, and Trevor started doing his language trick, speaking Zulu and ex-Xhosa.
And they were shocked.
Fascinated. Even though they initially thought he was a colored kid, his language proved to them that he was one of them. Trevor realized these kids were all in the B classes.
Because of the systemic disadvantages.
Right. So he went to the school counselor and made an active choice to drop out of the advanced A classes so he could be in the B classes with his tribe. He chose to be held back academically rather than be separated from the people he felt he truly belonged with.
It was a defining moment, choosing his own identity in a world that constantly tried to categorize him. And that strong sense of self was undoubtedly forged by the family environment he grew up in.
The matriarchy.
Yes. Trevor grew up in a world entirely run by women. Because of apartheid's design, with men largely absent due to working in the mines, being sent to prison, or living in exile, it was the women who held the community together.
And his family had some huge personalities.
In Trevor's family, the key figures were incredibly distinct. You had his grandfather Temperance, who was a boisterous, bipolar former boxer.
But the women were the anchors.
The real anchors were his grandmother Frances, who was the sharp, calculating matriarch running the house, and his great-grandmother Coco, who was blind, frail, and sat stationary by the coal stove all day.
And these women were deeply, deeply religious. Sundays for Trevor were an absolute grueling slog.
A marathon.
They went to not one, not two, but 3 different churches because Patricia believed each one gave her something different.
Right at the church circuit.
They'd start at a mixed megachurch, which Trevor describes playfully as jubilant Christian karaoke with a former bodybuilder pastor.
Then the white church.
Yeah, they'd drive to a wealthy white church where they did deep analytical scripture study, and Trevor actually loved the biblical action stories.
And then the final stop.
Finally, they drive all the way to Soweto for Black Church. This one was passionate, lacked air conditioning, and lasted 3 to 4 hours. But it had one redeeming quality for Trevor.
Violent demon casting.
Violent demon casting. People would run down the aisles, the ushers would tackle them like bouncers, and the pastor would violently shake them until they collapsed.
It was a highly charged spiritual environment. Religion permeated everything, which sets the stage perfectly for the demon poop incident.
Oh man, this story.
It perfectly illustrates the clash between Trevor's logical, somewhat modern upbringing and the deeply entrenched supernatural beliefs of his community.
It is a hilarious clash. So Trevor was around 5 years old, it was pouring rain, and he was terrified of the flies in the outdoor communal outhouse.
Naturally.
So he has this brilliant idea to just lay down some newspaper on the kitchen floor and do his business indoors.
As a 5-year-old does.
He's right in the middle of it when he realizes blind great-grandmother Coco is sitting just a few feet away. She smells something and starts calling out, playing this incredibly tense game of sonar. Who's there? Hello?
He must have been terrified.
Trevor freezes. He finishes silently, folds up the newspaper, hides in the bottom of the trash, and pretends to be asleep.
But then Patricia comes home.
But when his mom comes home and finds it, she doesn't assume it was a 5-year-old trying to avoid the rain. Based on their cultural beliefs, she makes the massive leap of logic that a demon has cursed the house and left a physical totem.
In their community, witchcraft is a deadly serious matter. To destroy the curse, you have to burn the physical manifestation.
Right, in the driveway.
They take the newspaper out to the driveway and set it on fire. It doesn't stop there. The alarm is raised, and the grandmother goes down the street calling an emergency community prayer meeting.
Everyone piles in.
The house fills up with older women praying fiercely to drive out the demon.
And the kicker is, Trevor is pulled into the middle of the circle by his grandmother and forced to lead a prayer to cast out the demon.
Which is him.
So he's sitting there, sweating, praying to God to please cut whoever did this a break. He knew he was the demon. He went to bed carrying this immense guilt, not because of the prank, but because he felt he had wasted God's time by making him listen to hours of prayers over a turd.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Patricia's intense religious devotion and her completely unique parenting style were born out of a profound history of trauma.
We really need to talk about her past.
We learn about her backstory as an unwanted second girl.
Right.
She was sent away to the homelands in Transkei, where she was treated essentially as a farm animal.
It's horrific.
She literally ate dirt from the riverbank and fought dogs and pigs for scraps of food. When she finally made it back and started earning a wage as a secretary, she was hit with the black tax.
Explain that for our listeners.
This is the generational curse, where any success a person achieves is immediately drained by the obligation to pull the rest of the extended family up from zero.
That context makes her decisions with Trevor so incredibly powerful. She was determined to give him a completely blank slate.
Starting with his name.
Exactly. That's why she named him Trevor. In their culture, names usually have deep meanings that become self-fulfilling prophecies. But Trevor meant nothing in South Africa. It had no biblical or family baggage.
A truly clean slate.
She didn't want him beholden to any predetermined fate, and she treated him like an adult, teaching him to debate and question authority.
Even her own authority.
Yes, he remembers arguing with her over reading the Chronicles of Narnia, trying to convince her that Aslan the lion wasn't a false idol, but actually a Christ figure.
He's a sharp kid.
And he questioned the rules at his Catholic school. He couldn't understand why he wasn't allowed to take communion just because he wasn't Catholic, so he snuck in and ate the wafers and drank the grape juice himself.
Because the rule didn't make logical sense to him.
Exactly. And when the school wanted to punish him, Patricia shockingly took his side against the principal, agreeing that the rule lacked logic.
Their relationship was built on this incredible intellectual sparring. When it came to discipline, instead of just shouting at him, Patricia would slide formal letters under his door, quoting scripture and detailing his infractions.
And Trevor would write back.
Having hung around her office, he would write formal, corporate-style business letters back, defending his actions. It was a masterclass in teaching a child how to think critically and advocate for himself.
She was a force of nature. Even her driving was an exercise in resourcefulness. They had this broken-down Tangerine VW Beetle, and she acted as the original hybrid car.
Love this detail.
To save gas money, she would turn the engine off completely on downhills and coast through traffic lights. Trevor was so embarrassed when he had to push the car through traffic.
But that car also represented freedom.
It did. And it relates back to an incredibly intense story. On a Sunday, when the car wouldn't start, they were forced to take unregulated minibuses.
Which were very dangerous.
They ended up in a vehicle with a hostile Zulu driver who was threatening them, and Patricia literally threw Trevor out of the moving minibus, grabbed his baby brother, and jumped out after him just to save their lives.
It is a stark reminder of the underlying violence of their reality. They're constantly navigating pain. But Trevor learned to process it in unique ways, often through his own mistakes and heartbreaks.
Like with Foofy.
Take the story of Foofy, the family dog. Trevor loved Foofy, but thought she was incredibly stupid because she never responded to his calls.
It turned out she was just deaf.
Right. But Foofy had a secret life. She was jumping their 5-foot wall every day and spending time with a colored boy in another neighborhood who claimed her as his own dog, named Spotty.
Trevor was devastated when he found out. Patricia actually had to go over and buy their own dog back for 100 rand.
Just to get her back.
Trevor cried the whole way home, feeling utterly betrayed. But Patricia had zero sympathy. She told him Foofy still loved him and to get over it.
The poignant lesson Trevor extracted from that incident is so valuable for all of us. He realized that Foofy wasn't cheating on him maliciously. She was just a dog living her life to the fullest. It taught him a profound truth. You do not own the thing that you love.
That empathy extended to the people who hurt him, too. When they moved to the colored neighborhood of Eden Park, Trevor faced brutal bullying.
Because he didn't fit neatly into a box.
He was an outsider, seen as either too black or too white. One day, a group of older boys pelted him mercilessly with hard mulberries from a neighborhood tree. He ran home crying, and his stepfather, Abel, a man with a dangerous temper, took Trevor to go get revenge.
And Abel's reaction was extreme.
Abel caught the ringleader and began viciously beating him with a branch.
It was a terrifying moment of disproportionate retribution, and Trevor had a sudden, striking realization during the beating. He looked in the bully's eyes and saw pure terror.
He saw himself, almost.
In that mirror of pain, Trevor recognized that this boy wasn't a monster. He was just a traumatized kid reacting to a world that had systematically taught him to hate himself. Trevor's desire for revenge instantly turned into horror at what he had unleashed.
He was learning the brutal hierarchies of society on every level, even in romance. There's this highly relatable, awkward story about Valentine's Day.
Oh, poor Trevor.
He worked up the courage to ask a girl named Maylene to be his Valentine outside of McDonald's. She said yes, and he was thrilled. But on the actual day, with his teddy bear and flowers in hand, she casually dropped him because Lorenzo, the popular, handsome white boy, had asked her out.
Ouch.
Trevor understood immediately. Even as a child, he recognized that in their society's racial hierarchy, Lorenzo was the ultimate prize, and Trevor didn't stand a chance. It's heartbreaking how early kids internalize those systemic ladders.
Which brings us to the profound absence of the ultimate male figure in his life. his father.
Let's bring it back to Robert.
For years, they spent Sunday afternoons together, eating Swiss potato rusty and Sprite. But as Trevor became a teenager, and as his stepfather, Abel's abusive presence began to dominate their lives, Robert moved to Cape Town, and they completely lost touch.
It wasn't until Trevor was 24 years old that Patricia urged him to go find his father. She told him he needed to finish that story.
She always pushed him to face things.
So Trevor went on a massive search. He had to battle the bureaucracy of the Swiss embassy, who initially wouldn't help him because his name wasn't on his own birth certificate.
Because of that lie from the hospital on day one.
Exactly. Finally, a letter came back from Robert. Trevor flew to Cape Town for this incredibly nervous reunion.
And the emotional climax of this reunion is stunning. Robert pulled out an oversized photo album. Inside, he had meticulously collected every clipping, every article, every tiny comedy club listing of Trevor's entire career.
10 years of silence, and his dad had been quietly tracking his success the entire time.
This raises an important question. How do we define parental love when distance is legally and circumstantially enforced?
That's a huge question.
Trevor had spent years wondering if his father cared. But seeing that scrapbook, he realized that despite the gap, Robert had always been watching. The ultimate takeaway for Trevor, and for us, is the profound psychological gift of being chosen.
Robert chose to have him.
Chose to answer his letter, and chose to quietly love him from afar.
It is a beautiful, full-circle moment. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Today, we've unpacked how a potent mix of humor, a mastery of language, and the unyielding guidance of a rebellious mother provided a roadmap for survival and self-definition in a world literally designed to crush both.
It's a remarkable testament to the human spirit.
And we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. If our identities are so heavily constructed by the languages we speak and the rigid systemic categories society places us in, to what extent are we the authors of our own life story versus simply improvising within the boundaries drawn by others? Think about that. We will see you next time.